The Student Data Privacy Consortium is a group that is comprised of K-12 districts from all over the United States and with a similar interest in working with vendors to ensure that privacy concerns by K-12 school districts are addressed. We began working with vendors around student data privacy concerns a number of years ago, and it was challenging doing that work by ourselves. And so when we found the consortium, we realized that there was a collective of districts, and that together, if we approach vendors with a large number of school districts, we have a lot more powerful voice in working through privacy issues. The world's very different now in that there's an app for everything. And in K-12 education, there are many great apps that can help students learn. The challenge is that sometimes the companies making those apps don't focus around the privacy issues. And so it's very easy for a teacher or a school district or a school to find an app that might do great things for students. And at the same time, we don't know what they're doing with all that student data that's collected. So the concern that we have with working with vendors around student data privacy is that they are good stewards of that data. So when we work with them around a student data privacy agreement, we're asking what types of data do you collect? Where do you store that? What is the destruction policy of that data once we no longer are in business with you? And so those are the things that we're looking for so that we know and we can tell parents and students where their data is going and how it's being used. So, things we look for in apps that are free. They need to be quality apps, and they need to be connected to curriculum, of course, and they need to have value as an instructional resource. And we also need to know what they're doing with that data. So are they making, they're not supposed to be providing ads to our students. So how are they monetizing to be able to exist as a company? And so what we have to be careful about is, and it's in our student data privacy agreement, is how is the data collected? And if it's shared, who is it shared with? And what rights and responsibilities do they have? So that we can be sure that our vendors are behaving appropriately. There's also Oregon state law, in addition to federal law, that governs that for K-12 students. So together, in a consortium model, our voices are magnified. And so when we work with a vendor, it's not just Beaverton going to the vendor saying we have privacy concerns. It is the power of the national consortium. And so we've created a standard student data privacy agreement. And that agreement, while there are some differences between states because of state law changes and differences, the agreement is, the core of the agreement is the same across the United States. So that actually makes it easier for vendors because when they sign an agreement in Alabama, for example, for a piece of software, and then in Oregon we decide we want to work with them, they know, because they've signed that agreement in another state, that the core of the agreement stays the same. So it's actually easier for vendors in addition to magnifying our voices. And the challenge for us is that there are so many software companies that want to do good things for kids and impact learning. When we first, last fall, began our work, we opened a help desk ticket, and we told teachers that if you are considering software, please let us know so that we can start to vet privacy issues with the software. We have a spreadsheet now of over 1,600 apps in the district that teachers are interested in using. And so the challenge for us is that I think the school districts are just becoming aware of how important this is. Vendors are also just becoming aware about how important this is. Most of them, or if not all, have some sort of privacy agreement, but it's not to the level it needs to be. And so I think the challenge for us is that we are learning together on how to ensure that we are meeting federal and state guidelines with student data. And we are having to work with vendors in a completely new way. And vendors are learning how to work with us in a very different way. Because a number of years ago, it was just we would all click accept and we wouldn't read the terms and conditions, and that has to change. So we're in a very messy process of working with teaching and learning on how do we create the app vetting process so that we know when an app is to be used at a school that it meets the student data privacy and exceeds the student data privacy terms that we have. And we need to do that in a way that doesn't break innovation. So the worst thing we could do would be just to say we have a finite box of apps and you can only use those apps, because that doesn't let teachers go seek that one application that might make a difference for a student. So we've got to keep innovation and we've got to standardize. And so we're working with our teaching and learning team right now and developing our current progress is that we're creating a workflow. And so that workflow would begin with a teacher, or it might begin with a central office teaching and learning staff member that would find an app. We would take it through the alignment to curriculum, values and instructional resource first. And if it makes it through that evaluation, then that's when we sit down and we start looking at what are the student data privacy implications. And once we've completed that work, then that will go on to the approved app list. And so I think in our future, we're going to have a list of apps that are that teacher's toolbox that have been fully vetted. Teachers know that if they use this app, they have nothing more to do. And then we'll have a process in place with teaching and learning that will let us evaluate apps that are being considered. So the first, I think, thing you should look for is, of course, what is the value add to instruction? How does this work with our curriculum? How does this help students learn or demonstrate learning in a different way? Assuming that this app passes that test, then I think what teachers should do is read the terms and conditions very carefully. Be very aware of the data that is collected on a student that is part of their educational record, and know where that data is going and how it is to be used, who it is to be shared with, and what is the process for that data life cycle in which data is destroyed. Does that data exist from now on, or do they have a data destruction policy when you're no longer using it? Well, so in terms of thoughts that would be valuable to the conversation around student data privacy, it's a really challenging time for us in that we've got this awareness of how we need to protect student data, and we've got app stores with millions and hundreds of millions of apps. And so for us, really creating that process by which it's clear for teachers, clear for us, vendors understand their role and responsibility in this arrangement, I think is the work that we have to do.